Have you ever noticed how the men you want most often seem the least interested in you, while the ones you're not drawn to chase you endlessly? It almost feels unfair, but the truth is, attraction doesn't begin with looks, charm, or even chemistry. It begins with something far more subtle, something that happens before a man has even decided how he feels about you. And once you understand how to tap into that, you can flip indifference into desire without ever begging for attention or pretending to be someone you're not. Curiosity first, attraction later is one of the most overlooked truths when it comes to human connection, especially in the way men are drawn to women, because the reality is, men rarely move from a state of indifference to desire through being chased, convinced, or persuaded. They move when their curiosity is sparked, when something about you doesn't immediately fit into the neat little box his brain tries to place you in, when you're not predictable, not trying to prove your worth, not offering everything up front. And that unpredictability is what makes him lean in rather than pull away, because curiosity is what opens the door to attraction. It's the hook that pulls someone closer before they even realize why. And this has nothing to do with games or manipulation. It's about creating moments where he can't quite figure you out, where he finds himself wondering what else there is to you, where the conversation feels different from what he's used to. Because while many women think that attraction has to be instant and obvious, the truth is that curiosity can be the spark that eventually leads to desire, and it often happens in small, subtle ways, like when you respond with a playful twist instead of a predictable answer. When you mention something you're passionate about and then shift the focus elsewhere, leaving a part of your story untold. When you walk away from a conversation first instead of lingering to prove you're invested, or when you show that you have standards and boundaries that don't bend just because someone hasn't yet noticed you. Because men, like anyone else, are wired to pay attention to what doesn't feel ordinary. And when you become the woman who surprises him, not with grand gestures but with subtle differences in how you show up, you plant a seed of intrigue. And this intrigue matters more than immediate attraction, because attraction can fade quickly if there's nothing to fuel it, but curiosity has a way of lingering, of making him replay conversations in his head, of making him notice the details of who you are that he might have overlooked. And over time, curiosity can evolve into something far stronger, because it allows him to feel like he's discovering you rather than being sold to. And discovery is what creates ownership of desire. It makes him feel that he is choosing to lean in, not being pushed into it. So when you lead with curiosity, you're not asking him to want you immediately. You're giving him space to realize that he does. And that realization is infinitely more powerful than anything you could force. Emotional energy is magnetic because the way you carry yourself, the tone you bring into a room, and the feelings you project can completely change how a man perceives you, even if he wasn't initially interested, since people are drawn to how they feel when they're around someone. And men in particular respond not to a list of qualities or achievements, but to the emotional state a woman creates in their presence, which means that if you radiate lightness, warmth, and passion for life, you instantly become someone he associates with feeling good. And the more consistently you project that energy, the more difficult it becomes for him to ignore you, because attraction is less about looks or status and far more about the emotional imprint you leave behind. And when your presence communicates playfulness, humor, confidence, and openness, he begins to feel a shift inside himself without even knowing why. While the opposite is also true. If your energy feels heavy, negative, or desperate, he instinctively pulls away, because no one wants to attach themselves to a draining experience. And this doesn't mean you have to be fake or always cheerful. It means that cultivating emotional energy is about tapping into your own joy, your passions, your sense of humor, and allowing those qualities to spill over into interactions. So when you laugh easily, when you can turn a mundane moment into something fun, when you show genuine excitement for the things you love, it naturally creates an atmosphere that draws people close closer, because men, like anyone else, are constantly looking for relief from stress, from pressure, from monotony. And when you become the person who brings a spark into his day, you shift the way he sees you, even if at first he thought of you as just another face in the crowd. And the beauty of this is that emotional energy doesn't rely on looks, status, or what you think he wants. It relies on what you choose to cultivate within yourself, which means you're always in control of how magnetic you are, because when you consistently carry yourself with an energy that uplifts and excites, a man begins to crave that feeling. He starts to realize that being around you makes him feel alive, and eventually it is this emotional pull, not logic, not surface level attraction, that makes him want more. Because attraction built on looks or status can fade, but attraction built on the emotional state you create is lasting. And once you understand this, you stop focusing so much on trying to be perfect or impressive, and instead lean into the power of presence, of showing up in a way that lights up a room. And once a man experiences that energy from you, it becomes difficult for him to ignore, because long after the conversation ends, long after the meeting is over, the memory of how you made him feel lingers, and that memory is what begins to shift him from indifference to desire. Scarcity creates value, because when something feels rare, when it isn't always within reach, people instinctively assign it greater importance. And this principle applies directly to attraction, since men are wired to notice what isn't readily available. And when a woman is selective with her time, attention, and energy, she naturally communicates her self-worth in a way that no words could match, because availability without boundaries often breeds complacency, making someone feel as though they don't have to put in effort. But when you carry yourself as someone who doesn't automatically say yes to every request, who doesn't drop everything at a moment's notice, who chooses where and with whom she invests her energy, you immediately stand apart from the crowd. And this doesn't mean playing hard to get or pretending to be busy. It means genuinely recognizing that your time and presence are valuable, and only those who meet a certain standard will have access to it. And when a man encounters this energy, even if he wasn't initially interested, he begins to reevaluate, because scarcity forces him to confront the idea that he could miss out on something unique, and the human brain hates the feeling of missing out. So suddenly he begins to notice details about you he might have overlooked before, like the confidence you carry, the way others respond to you, or the fact that you're not waiting around for his validation. And this shift matters because desire thrives in the presence of challenge, not struggle or drama, but the kind of challenge that says, if you want access to me, you'll have to rise to the level I live at. And men find that irresistible because it awakens their instinct to pursue and invest. And once that instinct is triggered, interest often follows. But the power lies in understanding that scarcity doesn't come from withholding affection or being cold. It comes from living a life so full, so enriched with your own passions, friendships, and goals that you don't need his attention to feel complete. And that kind of independence is magnetic because it silently communicates that you're not here to be chosen, you're here to choose. And if he wants to be chosen, he needs to bring something meaningful to the table. And when a man realizes that your attention is not a given but a privilege, he begins to treat it with respect. And respect deepens into attraction because he knows he cannot take you for granted. And this is why some women who are constantly available struggle to ignite interest, while others, even with less outward effort, seem to pull men in effortlessly, because the difference lies not in appearance or charm, but in the perception of value, and value increases when something is scarce. So the more you embody selectiveness and standards, the more magnetic you become, not because you're withholding, but because you're reminding him, through your actions and energy, that you are someone someone to be pursued, not someone to be collected without effort, and that subtle shift can make any man want you, even when he initially thought he didn't. Shifting focus from him to you is one of the most powerful moves you can make when it comes to creating attraction, because the more you chase someone else's attention, the more you inadvertently communicate that their approval matters more than your own sense of fulfillment, and men pick up on this dynamic quickly, often without realizing it, which is why the women who stop trying to be noticed and instead pour their energy into building a life so rich, exciting, and fulfilling naturally become the ones men cannot ignore, since attraction doesn't just come from physical appearance or clever conversation. It comes from the undeniable glow of someone who is deeply engaged in her own passions, her growth, her relationships, and her purpose. And when you carry yourself as someone who doesn't need validation to feel valuable, it creates a magnetic shift, because men are instinctively drawn to energy that feels self-sustaining, like a flame that doesn't depend on someone else to keep it alive. And the beauty of this approach is that it removes the pressure of trying to impress or win him over. Instead, it reframes the entire dynamic so that he feels compelled to lean in and discover what makes your world so captivating. And this doesn't mean ignoring him or pretending he doesn't exist. It means that instead of centering him as the source of your happiness, you make yourself the centerpiece of your life. And this change creates a powerful contrast, because while many women unknowingly try to mold themselves into what they think a man wants, the woman who refuses to shrink or contort herself for someone else immediately stands out. And over time, that authenticity becomes irresistible, because a man may not always know what he's looking for, but he can feel when someone is living fully, and that feeling is addictive. So when you focus on cultivating your career, nurturing friendships, exploring hobbies, traveling, or simply deepening your self-awareness, you exude an energy that says, "I am already enough," and that energy is what flips the script from you seeking him to him seeking you. And once a man feels that he has to earn a place in your already beautiful self-directed life, his perspective shifts, because men are motivated not by desperation, but by the sense of stepping into something extraordinary. And when you no longer make him the project or the prize, but instead treat yourself as the prize by investing in your own growth and joy, you give him no choice but to recognize your value. And this recognition often turns disinterest into curiosity, and curiosity into desire, because a woman who is rooted in herself, who isn't anxiously waiting for someone else to complete her story, becomes the woman who writes her own story. And that kind of woman is unforgettable. So when you shift focus from him to you, you stop trying to pull him in and instead create a gravity that naturally draws him closer. Micro moments of connection are often the silent bridges that transform indifference into attraction, because while people tend to think that big dramatic gestures are what capture someone's attention, in reality it is the subtle, almost invisible exchanges that build the deepest sense of closeness. And for men especially, these small cues can shift their perspective without them even realizing why, since human beings are wired to respond emotionally to signals of warmth, familiarity, and recognition. So when you hold eye contact just a second longer than usual, when your smile appears genuine and lights up your face in a way that feels unforced, when your laughter rings with authenticity rather than performance, it creates a ripple that leaves an imprint, and these ripples accumulate, changing the way he feels in your presence. Because attraction is rarely about logical reasoning, it's about the feeling someone associates with you, and micro moments are what generate that feeling. And the beauty of these subtle exchanges is that they bypass the pressure of trying to impress and instead root themselves in presence, because when you're fully engaged in a moment, leaning into it without distraction, it communicates that he matters in that slice of time, even if only briefly, and that presence is intoxicating, since so many people walk through interactions half checked out, preoccupied, or self-conscious. But when you look at someone with curiosity, when you nod at the right moment, when your hand brushes his in passing, or your body language leans slightly closer without forcing intimacy, it signals safety and interest, two elements that unlock attraction at a subconscious level. And the more of these micro moments are created, the more they stack upon one another until a man begins to feel connected to you in ways he cannot fully articulate. Because while he may not remember every word of a conversation, he will remember how it felt to be truly seen, acknowledged, and appreciated. And this is why people often find themselves drawn to someone they didn't initially notice, because little by little those moments carve out an emotional space that becomes irresistible. And the beauty of this is that it doesn't require perfection, strategy, or pretense. It simply requires awareness, the willingness to show up as yourself while staying attuned to the interaction. So instead of chasing his attention with big declarations or overexerting effort, focus on the tiny signals that invite closeness, because those are the ones that bypass the rational mind and land in the emotional center. And once he feels emotionally connected to you, even in subtle increments, that connection plants the seed for desire, because desire thrives not only on mystery or challenge, but on the comfort of being understood. And when a man experiences both intrigue and safety through these small but meaningful gestures, the combination becomes nearly impossible to resist. And that is why micro moments are so powerful, because they do not demand attention, they quietly earn it. They build intimacy step by step until what was once indifference slowly transforms into interest, and what was once interest has the potential to grow into something much deeper. Patience wins the long game, because attraction is not always immediate, and many men who seem uninterested at first may only need time and consistent exposure to the right kind of energy to see someone in a new light, since rushing the process or pushing for instant validation often backfires by creating pressure that makes him withdraw rather than lean in. But when you understand that desire can unfold gradually, you approach connections differently, focusing not on forcing a spark, but on allowing it to build naturally. And this shift is powerful because it removes the desperation that often sabotages attraction, replacing it with quiet confidence that communicates you are worth discovering at his pace, not on demand. And when you embody patience, you also create space for him to reveal his true intentions. Because if someone is only temporarily disinterested due to distractions, stress, or not yet knowing you well enough, patience gives the situation room to evolve. While if he is genuinely not aligned, patience protects your energy by preventing you from wasting it in pursuit of someone unwilling to reciprocate. And the beauty of patience is that it works hand in hand with self-value, since a woman who doesn't rush or beg for attention shows that she trusts her own worth, and that trust is magnetic, because men notice when someone doesn't crumble under indifference, and it makes them curious about what gives her that strength. And often over time, that curiosity grows into attraction, because while beauty or charm may catch a man's eye instantly, what holds his attention is the gradual recognition that this person has depth, consistency, and an energy he can rely on. And patience is what allows those qualities to be revealed layer by layer, without pressure, without performance, and without fear of rejection. And another overlooked aspect of patience is that it naturally builds scarcity. Because when you are not rushing to hand over your attention, when you are willing to let things unfold at a slower rhythm, he feels he has to earn access, which heightens your value in his eyes. So instead of reacting to indifference with anxiety or retreat, you hold steady, continue nurturing your own life, and allow the dynamic to evolve on its own timeline. And in many cases, what starts as disinterest turns into pursuit, not because you did anything dramatic, but because you allowed allowed time to do the work, since attraction is not always an explosion. Sometimes it's a quiet fire that builds slowly until it's undeniable. And men, like anyone else, often need repeated interactions, familiar comfort, and a gradual recognition of chemistry before desire kicks in. So patience isn't passive, it's active restraint, a choice to trust that your value will shine through without force. And when you play the long game with patience, you give yourself the highest chance of turning indifference into interest, because you're not chasing, you're not convincing, you're simply allowing him to see what you bring, until eventually he realizes that the very qualities he overlooked are the ones he doesn't want to lose. At the end of the day, making any man want you, even when he's not interested at first, is not about chasing, convincing, or trying harder. It's about embodying the qualities that naturally pull someone closer without force. When you spark curiosity instead of seeking instant attraction, when you radiate emotional energy that makes him feel alive, when you understand the power of scarcity and show that your attention is valuable, when you focus on building your own rich, fulfilling life rather than centering him, when you create micro moments of connection that linger long after the moment ends, and when you trust patience to let the attraction unfold over time, you shift the entire dynamic. What once felt like indifference can transform into desire. Not because you manipulated him, but because you elevated yourself into someone magnetic, unforgettable, and deeply worth pursuing. In the end, the secret is simple. The more you invest in being the woman who inspires, uplifts, and captivates through her own presence, the less you'll ever need to make a man want you. He won't be able to help himself.